Jazz is inferior music, according to the Frankfurt School. Welcome back to Philosophy Examined. In this video, we're diving deep into a controversial perspective that was held by some members of the Frankfurt School, a prominent intellectual movement from the 1920s and 1930s, that jazz is inferior music. For members of the Frankfurt School, superior music was epitomized by the classical works of composers such as Beethoven, Bach, and especially those from the Second Viennese School, like Arnold Schoenberg. To them, classical music encapsulated authentic, autonomous art. Its complexity, resistance to easy consumption, and profound emotional depth stood in stark contrast to the perceived simplicity and standardization of jazz music. These classical compositions were not just technically superior to jazz, but also resisted the commodification and standardization of the culture industry. They required active listening, engagement, and contemplation, fostering a critical consciousness in the listener, rather than merely serving as passive entertainment. Before delving into their critiques on jazz, it's essential to understand the origins and background of the Frankfurt School. Founded in the early 20th century, the Frankfurt School originated from the Institute for Social Research at the University of Frankfurt, Germany. While the name Frankfurt School has colloquially come to represent the broader intellectual movement, it initially referred to this specific institute. The school emerged in the backdrop of political upheavals, economic crises, and the rising threats of totalitarianism in Europe. Its members were profoundly influenced by the socio-political conditions of their time, combining elements of Marxist theory with a critical analysis of contemporary culture and society. This synthesis aimed to explore the relationship between culture, art, society, and the prevailing political and economic systems. Key figures of the school included Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Walter Benjamin, Herbert Marcuse, and others. These intellectuals not only engaged with philosophical thought but also delved into diverse fields like sociology, psychology, and cultural criticism. Their interdisciplinary approach provided a unique lens through which they examined various facets of society, from the rise of mass culture to the effects of industrialization and the role of art in a capitalist world. The Frankfurt School's work was characterized by its critical stance against both capitalist and Stalinist forms of totalitarianism. They were deeply concerned with issues of social alienation, the erosion of individual autonomy, and the potential dangers of mass culture in shaping public consciousness. Given their focus on examining the interplay between culture and power structures, it's no surprise that they would eventually turn their attention to emerging popular art forms, including jazz. Now, with this foundational understanding of the Frankfurt School, their critique of jazz music becomes even more fascinating and multidimensional. Their perspective on jazz wasn't just an isolated opinion on a musical genre but rooted deeply in their broader concerns about society, culture, and the individual. Theodor Adorno, one of the Frankfurt School's most vocal critics of jazz, harbored a complex and often misunderstood critique of the genre. At its core, he saw jazz as symptomatic of the culture industry, a term he coined with Max Horkheimer to describe how popular culture in capitalist societies becomes a product, mass-produced to satisfy the demands of the market. Theodor Adorno, born Theodor Ludwig Wiesengrund in 1903 in Frankfurt, Germany, was a pivotal figure in the world of philosophy, sociology, and musicology in the 20th century. His multifaceted background plays a significant role in understanding his perspectives on jazz and culture. Born into a mixed religious family, with a Catholic mother of Corsican descent and a Jewish father, Adorno was familiar with the complexities and tensions of cultural assimilation from an early age. His early education, deeply rooted in German idealism and the classical works of philosophers like Kant and Hegel, juxtaposed with his keen interest in music. In fact, Adorno was not merely a philosopher discussing music from an outsider's viewpoint, He was a trained musician and musicologist. He pursued studies in composition and even took lessons with Alban Berg, a pivotal figure in the Second Viennese School of Music. This deep immersion in both the theoretical and practical realms of music grants a particular weight to his critiques. In the 1930s, as the Nazis rose to power, Adorno, due to his Jewish lineage, faced increasing persecution. He fled to England and later to the United States, where he would spend a significant portion of his life. This period of exile exposed him to the burgeoning world of American popular culture, including jazz, which was gaining massive traction during this time. It's essential to recognize that Adorno's critique of jazz was not merely rooted in an abstract philosophy but was also influenced by his direct experiences and observations of American culture, society, and its contrasts with European tradition. It was in this context, an intersection of his rigorous European philosophical and musical training, his first-hand observations of American mass culture, and his concerns about the standardization and commodification of art, that Adorno approached jazz. He saw it as a reflection of broader societal trends and as a medium through which the implications of modernity and the culture industry could be dissected. Adorno perceived jazz as representing standardized and repetitive elements. In his view, jazz compositions, despite their variations, adhered to certain formulas that made them predictable. He argued that these patterns, designed for easy consumption, undermined the very essence of what music, as an art form, should aim to convey: deep expression, raw emotion, and uninhibited creativity. However, it was Adorno's stance on jazz improvisation that was particularly controversial. Jazz, known for its improvisational elements, was seen by many as the epitome of musical freedom. Musicians responded to the moment, creating melodies on the spot, seemingly free from constraints. Yet, Adorno contested this widely held belief. To him, even the improvisational aspects of jazz, rather than being genuinely free, were confined within specific boundaries, making them, in essence, predictable. For Adorno, the solos and riffs, which jazz enthusiasts often heralded as spontaneous bursts of creativity, were in reality entrenched in a set of standards. He coined the term pseudo-individualization to describe this phenomenon. In the context of jazz, it meant that while two performances might sound distinct at a superficial level, they invariably operated within the same set framework. This gave an illusion of uniqueness and individual expression, even when the underlying structure was largely the same. This perspective stemmed from Adorno's broader philosophy on art and culture. He believed that for art to serve as a genuine critique of society, it needed to maintain autonomy, resisting standardization and commodification. Jazz, in being commercially popular and adhering to certain patterns, even in improvisation, seemed to him to lack this critical autonomy. Walter Benjamin, unlike Adorno, approached jazz from a somewhat different angle, driven largely by his reflections on the nature and implications of modern technology on art. In his seminal essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Benjamin posited a transformative shift in the realm of art due to the emergence of technologies that enabled mass reproduction. This was a shift he believed had profound cultural implications. Walter Benjamin, born in 1892 in Berlin, stands as one of the most enigmatic and influential thinkers of the 20th century. A literary critic, philosopher, and cultural commentator, Benjamin's works traverse the boundaries of aesthetics, history, and metaphysics. Growing up in an affluent Jewish family, he was exposed early to the world of arts and letters, fostering a deep intellectual curiosity. As he matured, Benjamin engaged with German Romanticism, Marxist theory, and Jewish mysticism, weaving these influences into a unique and often unconventional tapestry of thought. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, Benjamin collaborated with various intellectual figures of his time, including Bertolt Brecht and Gershom Scholem. His writings, From reflections on photography to his critiques of modern urban life in the arcades of Paris, showcased an acute sensitivity to the cultural transformations brought about by technology and capitalist modernity. His essay The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction remains a cornerstone in the study of art and culture, reflecting on how art's essence changes with its reproducibility. The political upheavals of his era deeply impacted Benjamin. As the Nazi regime ascended in Germany, his Jewish heritage and leftist inclinations placed him in peril. His final years were marked by a tragic odyssey across Europe, attempting to evade capture. Sadly, in 1940, fearing deportation and internment by the Nazis, Benjamin took his own life at the French-Spanish border. Despite the tragedy and despair that marked the end of his life, Benjamin's legacy endures. His nuanced critiques on culture, technology, and the nature of history continue to inform and challenge scholars and thinkers globally. For Benjamin, every piece of art has an aura, a unique presence in time and space, an authenticity that links the work to its original context, history, and the creative process. This aura emanates from the artwork's singular existence, its place in tradition, and its history of ownership and appreciation. However, with the onset of mechanical reproduction, from photography to the phonograph, this aura was being diluted. Art was no longer confined to a specific place or moment, it could be replicated and distributed widely. And while this democratized access to art, it also, in Benjamin's view, stripped art of its unique essence and context. When applying this perspective to jazz, the implications become clearer. Jazz, which originated as a live performance art, an immediate and shared experience among musicians and listeners, began its transformative journey as it became commercialized and mechanically reproduced. With the rise of the phonograph, jazz could be recorded and replayed anywhere and anytime, divorced from the original context of its creation. To Benjamin, this shift had a double edge. On one hand, it made jazz accessible to a broader audience, spreading its influence and reach. On the other, this very accessibility, this detachment from the original experience, risked diminishing the unique aura of a jazz performance. The raw energy, the interaction between musicians, the response of the live audience, the spontaneous improvisations, all these elements that defined jazz were, in some way, lost or transformed when confined to a record. Furthermore, as jazz recordings became commercial products, they were also susceptible to the whims of market demands. The need for hit records, chart-topping singles, and commercial success could potentially influence the art form, leading to standardization or a move away from more experimental, less commercially viable sounds. In this light, jazz was not just losing its aura due to mechanical reproduction but was also at risk of being molded by capitalist imperatives. It's also worth noting the broader critiques both Adorno and Benjamin had on the commodification of art and culture. They viewed jazz as becoming commercialized, and in the process, saw it being transformed from an art form into a product meant for mass consumption, a result of capitalist culture. This stance on jazz, particularly Adorno's, has been met with criticism. Many argue that jazz, born out of resistance from African American communities against systemic oppression, stands as a testament to freedom and creativity. Its various evolutions and subgenres over the decades reflect its adaptability and diverse range of expression. While Adorno was one of its most vocal members in his criticism of jazz, his views largely represent the most detailed critique from the school on the subject. While not every member wrote explicitly about jazz, the broader themes of the Frankfurt School, such as their concerns about the culture industry, commodification, and the standardization of art forms in capitalist societies, would have implications for their views on popular culture, including jazz. However, it's crucial to understand that the Frankfurt School was not a monolithic entity. Each scholar had distinct views, and their critiques spanned various areas. Adorno's detailed writings on music and jazz are the most frequently cited in this context, but others like Max Horkheimer collaborated with Adorno on broader concepts that indirectly relate to their views on music and popular culture. So what became of the Frankfurt School? The school, originally based at the Institute for Social Research at the Goethe University in Frankfurt, had to relocate due to the rise of the Nazi regime in the 1930s. Given the Jewish backgrounds of many members and their Marxist leanings, the school was a target of Nazi hostility. The institute was temporarily moved to Geneva and later settled in New York City during World War II, affiliating itself with Columbia University. Post-World War II, some members of the Frankfurt School, including Adorno and Horkheimer, returned to Germany and re-established the institute in Frankfurt. Here, they continued their academic work, and the school saw a second generation of thinkers emerge, including Jürgen Habermas, who further developed and expanded upon the foundational ideas of the school. In the subsequent years, the Frankfurt School's critical theory became a significant influence in various academic disciplines, from sociology and philosophy to cultural studies and beyond. While the original members have long passed, their intellectual legacy continues to be influential in contemporary thought, with critical theory adapting to the ever-evolving challenges of modern society. While the Frankfurt School's critiques on jazz highlight the concerns about commercialization and standardization of art in a capitalist society, it's also crucial to consider the wider context and evolution of jazz. Art and its interpretation remain subjective. The question remains, was the Frankfurt School's critique of jazz a deep insight or a misunderstanding of a transformative art form? While Theodor Adorno and his colleagues provided profound critiques on many aspects of culture, their views on jazz have been contentious, often labeled as elitist or even racially insensitive. Some critics argue that their dismissal of jazz, an art form rooted in the Black experience in America and embodying resistance, resilience, and cultural evolution, was more a reflection of European elitism than an objective critique of music. Jazz, emerging from the rhythms of African music, the spirituals of slaves, and the blues of the Deep South, was not just another genre, it was the voice of a historically oppressed community finding expression and agency. For the Frankfurt School, grounded in European classical tradition and philosophy, this context might not have been fully appreciated or understood. Their primary lens of critique was the culture industry and the commodification of art in capitalist societies. However, jazz's foundational essence lay beyond mere commercialism. To categorize jazz merely as a product of the culture industry, without understanding its deeper cultural, historical, and social roots, might be seen as a form of intellectual oversight. Furthermore, one cannot ignore the potential racial undertones in such critiques. By sidelining jazz, the Frankfurt School indirectly marginalized a significant African American cultural contribution. Such a stance, even if unintentional, could easily be construed as a Eurocentric bias, undermining non-European forms of artistic expression and innovation. However, it's essential to view the Frankfurt School's critiques in their broader context, understanding their concerns about the widespread standardization of culture. Yet, one must also critically question whether their Eurocentric perspectives hindered a full and appreciative understanding of the richness and depth of jazz as a transformative art form. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment on this video. Also share our channel with others like you who appreciate intelligent and engaging content.